Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in English and in French, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have to our fourth episode of season 9, a very special guest and author, Ruth Rotkowitz. And just like every of my past episodes, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Ruth, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. I have always been a writer. Writing is just in me. It's just something, even from the time I was little, I knew no matter what else I was going to have to do in my life, I was going to be a writer. And I was. I mean, I worked. I was an English teacher in high schools and colleges. I did home tutoring. I did some editing. I was a freelance writer. I was a staff writer on a paper, a monthly paper in Princeton. So I did a lot of things that gave me a lot of experience, but I always had a book in me. And I always had a story that I wanted to tell, that I wanted to get out there. And it was the story of a character, of a troubled character. In fact, it was always there, but it kind of came out. I took a course when I was home with little kids in New Jersey. It was a writing course. And I said, let me give it a try. I need some inspiration. And the writer wrote the kind of books that I am not interested in. So I wasn't sure I would respond. She wrote, romances. But she came up with a prompt that actually sounds very hokey, but it worked for me. She said, imagine you're at a lake and you're going fishing and you throw in the line and you pull out a fish and you look at the fish and you go, I don't like that fish. You put it back and you keep doing that until you get a fish that you say, yeah, this is my fish. Well, my first fish was a good one. It was a picture of a troubled young woman. I knew right away she would be someone who is presenting one front to the world, but concealing her true pain and her true demons. And she would be edging closer and closer to mental breakdown. I knew immediately she would be a child of Holocaust survivors. This is my own experience, as I am. And it just sort of all came together that this is a character that can show people what it's like to live a double life, and a story and a person that can kind of get the message across that, first of all, you're not alone. And second of all, you can't hide this forever. It's like a pot with boiling water, and eventually the lid is going to pop off. You're going to explode. You can't keep up like that. Right. So all this I knew right away. So when that fish came in the line, it was already in me. And I just said, that's it. I'm going to write this book. And it was years. It was years in the writing, years of revising, years of getting at workshops. In the middle of all this, I had another brainstorm of another book, completely, totally a love story, a completely different, a love story gone bad. I wrote that book. I actually got an agent for that book who was in love with it and said, this is going to sell big. Okay. 3 years, she couldn't sell it. She said, it's not, it doesn't fit neatly into a category because the ending was not a happy ending. They don't like that. And I wasn't going to change it. I said, that was the whole point of it. She said, what else do you have? I showed her the beginning of my book, Escaping the Whale. She said, there's no category for this. It's not going to sell. I'm not going to take it. So we parted ways. That's the problem really in the business. They're looking for a category. What shelf would it be on? Some of the publishing houses won't even take a book before they run it by the sales team to just see what, can you sell this? How would you sell this? What shelf would it be on? I never cared about that. It just wasn't me. So what happened was I just wrote the book. I was very involved in it, and I left the other one. I let it go, even though I was very involved with that too. And again, I tried to sell it. I tried to do, agents and with, most small presses, no takers. I said, you know what, it doesn't matter because I got it out. I was glad with that. Then two things actually changed for me. First of all, we moved from New Jersey to Arizona, and I joined the Phoenix Holocaust Association, and I met a lot of other children of survivors. We're called 2Gs, second generation. And some of them had written memoirs of their parents' experiences. Hardly anybody had written fiction. That's the thing. My thing was fiction. It just isn't a big field, that kind of thing. There are a few things here and there, but it's mostly the memoirs. I'm not into memoirs. And, my family story was already written up by my cousin and my sister. We're done with that. And I prefer fiction to read as well as to write. Anyway, so I just felt like meeting these people. I said, maybe they were wrong. Maybe there is a market. Maybe there are people who would be interested in this. Maybe it's not 1 million people, but maybe there are some people. So that sort of gave me the idea, and I started working with the organization a little bit. Having been an English teacher, they asked me to do book talks. They sponsor certain books and programs in the course of the year, and I was fine with going around and giving talks. Okay, the next thing that changed it, and I think I explained all this in the preface to my first book, Escaping the Whale. Both my books have a whale in the title, but they have nothing to do with marine biology. It's Escaping the Whale and the Whale Surfaces, but it's all, it's a metaphor. But anyway, so the second thing was we found out that there's a program. My family's from Vienna. We found out that there was a program called the Jewish Welcome Service of Vienna. And they, if they accept you, you have to send in the information about, your parents. And if your parents fled the country because of the discrimination, because they were being hunted down, you qualify to come in this program where they sponsor you. They pay for your plane fare and hotel stay for a week, and they take you around the city, some tours, and you have a lot of free time also. I had never been to Vienna. I had never been interested in going. I just had bad feelings about the city because of what my parents went through. And so I decided, this is a good situation. I went with my sister and 2 cousins, 4 ladies. We went on this trip, and it was terrific. It was great. There were about 30, 35 people in the group. First of all, it was very weird, to be able to go to the apartment buildings where both my parents grew up, to see the streets that they talked about, this is the street where the Nazis chased my uncle down the street. It's like it's there. It's a real, place. It was very, very interesting and very inspiring. We were welcomed warmly by everyone. Everybody was nice, which made me sort of scared, because I remember my mother saying, everybody was nice until 1938 when Hitler took over. Then they weren't nice, but they were nice till that day. But everybody, we had a warm welcome. In fact, the president of Austria had us as guests at the Habsburg Castle. I'm mispronouncing it. It was the name of the castle where the monarchy used to live. It's gorgeous, of course. And he feted us, and he gave a speech, and I was crying. His speech was so moving, and he really was saying, I know as a country, as a city, we have a lot to atone for, but we want you to know this is also your home. In fact, shortly after that, they made this rule that we could apply for Austrian citizenship as a result of, some countries are doing that, of our parents. But it was right before that it was being discussed. And he just gave a very, very warm speech. It was right before the Jewish New Year, and he said in Hebrew, Happy New Year at the end. So it was really, he was very nice. And the ambassador, I'm trying to think, I think it was the Israeli ambassador to Austria was there, and she's a child of survivors, and she spoke, and she said she felt completely comfortable there. It was just really, really interesting. And I met all these other people. Everybody has a story. Everybody who's a 2G whatever their parents went through, it's all different. So when I met all these people, I said, these people would read my book. I just felt like this, it isn't maybe a tremendous audience, but it's an audience. So when I got back, just serendipitously, I met someone who had published a memoir with a company that specializes in Holocaust memoirs.
Okay.
And I said, so do you think she would be interested in a work of fiction? She said, well, she usually does memoirs, but you never know. And I contacted her and she liked my book a lot. She said she wanted to publish it. She just wanted to warn me, it's not going to sell as well as memoirs. I said, fine. I just want to get it out there, I mean, I'll do whatever I can to spread the word, until I'm sick of it, and then I'll stop. And she published it. And then in the course of, it came out April 2020, which was the beginning of the COVID lockdown. So right away I said, oh, great, I can't go around to libraries and bookstores and all that, which, I mean, I'm kind of shy with in-person things anyway. But I figured I was going to do it.
Absolutely.
But it turns out it worked out better because on Zoom,
yes,
I spoke to groups all over the country. Mm-hmm. And one of the couples that I met on this Vienna trip live in Australia. They came to one of my talks, they woke up in the middle of the night to come, so, and again, I spread the word about it to them and people did respond. They bought the book and they have been so supportive and just loved it. And so many people said to me, oh, I can relate to this, definitely relate to it. And non-Jewish people too, who felt that it dealt with the immigrant experience as well. I've had Chinese readers, Indian readers, I have had them contact me and say, this is so much like what we go through, just like the details are different. But being a child of immigrants who are they want their children to make it in America, but marry in their group, like go this far, but not further. So I had a lot of that. Also, it came to me, another fish, in the process of writing it, that I remember very vividly going through the Iranian hostage crisis in 1980. I don't know why, that just was such a major event for me. And I decided to set the story in 1980 because I just remember the TVs were always on wherever you went. Everyone was like, be quiet, see what's going on with the hostages. Everyone was talking about it. I think maybe it was the first time that like my generation saw the United States as vulnerable. It was a really, pivotal, I would say it was a pivotal event for a lot of people I know and for me. So I decided that event somehow would trigger more, I wouldn't say mental illness, but would trigger a lot of problems in my main character because she already was dealing with inherited trauma. She was the only female guidance counselor at the school where she worked. Mm-hmm. The school was having a huge increase in teenage pregnancies that she was left to handle. That was another issue that I came across in my teaching days. So I felt that the hostage crisis would feed into that, would exacerbate that problem for her. And she just goes on and on. She has a boyfriend. Everyone thinks he's Mr. Perfect. She's not so happy with him, but she hangs in there because if everyone says he's the one and you should get married, then, who is she to know any better, right? Yes. So she's got a lot of issues and she starts imagining there are demons in her closet. I had an aunt who was schizophrenic, so I know what can happen. Yes. There were just all kinds of things that her imaginings were going on, and she tried to conceal it because she knew it wasn't normal, but things got worse and worse for her. And things that the teenagers were going through, the pregnancies, the promiscuity for some of them, cutting was a big issue, teen suicide came up. So all those things actually, she kind of became a teenager again, even though she was in her late 20s in this first book. And she kind of went through a lot of that stuff until she just reached a breaking point and she felt that was it. She couldn't go on anymore. And the one thing she always thought she would never do, she realizes she has to get help. So I felt that the message was going to be that you can't, do this alone, and it's a serious problem. Now, in the course of that year, when I was doing all these Zoom talks for various organizations and book clubs, people were questioning me about my protagonist's childhood and background. And finally, a few of them said, "Why don't you write a prequel?" I said, I never thought of that, but maybe. I was stuck at home anyway with the lockdown. So I did write the prequel, which is The Whale Surfaces. And it was very interesting journey, I would say, to go back and try to imagine my protagonist in her early years. So Escaping the Whale begins when she's 28. In the prequel, I begin when she's 11, and it takes us till she's 22, graduating college. So there's 6 years in the middle to imagine, but that's how I did it. And I hope this answers the questions of my readers who asked me, tell me, about her background. And I did draw, it's not an autobiography by any means, but I did draw on some personal experience, some experience with people that I know or that I've read about. And I've really researched inherited trauma. I've been speaking about that. There's a lot coming out about that now, new studies and blah, blah. And recently, so after I did that, I got very good response to people. Yes, this answers the question. This could be combined into one book and blah, blah. Okay. I set up a website, which I was told I had to do. I went on social media, which I was told I had to do, all the things I never wanted to do. And I started a blog. And at the beginning, I was blogging about issues that came up in the news or whatever that related to my book, mental health issues or, other things like that. Well, finally, I came up with the idea because a lot of people were contacting me after reading my blog or reading my book saying, I'm also a child of survivors, but my experience was this way or that way, difference, the same. I said, you know what? I'm going to start doing interviews for the blog with children of Holocaust survivors. So I put out a call on the social media that I never wanted to be on. And I got all these reactions, so far. And it's work because some people, I'll send out a questionnaire. Some people just answer the questions. Some people answer the questions very vaguely. It's not enough. I have to get more from them. Some people just write up their story, just consider my questions in the background. And some people just say, I looked at your questions, but I want to talk to you. So we do it over the phone. And sometimes it's several steps. So far, I've posted 16 interviews. And I'm still getting some more in. And it's true that everybody's story is remarkable in some way and unique in some way. There's like no exact, everyone has a different story. And we're going by the Holocaust Museum in New York, in DC, their definition of a survivor. It used to be that right after the war, a lot of people felt a survivor is only someone who was in a concentration camp. You don't have a number on your arm, you can't say you're a survivor, which really was hard on people who struggled in other ways, who were hidden children, for example, or who, like my parents, fled across Europe, spent years, trying to be a step ahead of the Nazis. My mother ended up in France for 3 years. So, there were survivors too. It's a different experience. So we're using that definition, okay? And that's what the Phoenix Holocaust Association also uses. So anyone who qualifies as a child of survivors, if they contact me that they want to be interviewed, I will interview them. And the responses have been really interesting. People are finding their stories very interesting. It's sort of a combination of what their parents went through and how they feel it affected them and how they, affected their growing up, if they think inherited trauma played a role. One woman told a really amazing story of dealing with, a lot of people inherit trauma, they go, I don't know if you'd call it that or blah, blah, which I understand. But this woman was actually a scientist, and she said her daughter once she was maybe in her late 20s, whatever, or 30. She woke up screaming in the middle of the night, just screaming, inconsolable. And she starts telling her a story of something she went through, which she did not go through, but it was actually the grandmother's experience exactly. And she had never been told that.
Wow.
And she felt it. She said, it's not like I know it. I felt it in me that I went through this. So the mother said to me, no one can tell me there's no inherited trauma. I mean, somehow she absorbed this. So there's a lot of interesting things coming out. I had one man whose father was a Greek Jew. Most people don't know about that, about the Sephardic community. They think all the Jews came from Poland and Russia and Germany and Austria and Hungary, but it's a different culture, and they also were in concentration camps, and it was a different experience for them too, and it's a different experience for the child. So I tried to bring in things like that I think can teach us a lot. For example, mythology. The whole idea of the whale, I mean, I based it on the Jonah story, even though it's not, it's actually mentioned briefly in the prequel. And the other thing, it's maybe mentioned like in one line, but it's the metaphor of getting out of a tough situation, okay? Trying to escaping the whale that's keeping you, captive, almost like the Iranian hostages. You're captive. How do you get out? How do you free yourself? How do you free your soul? So that was like my metaphor, was the Jonah and the whale story. And when I started, and even in the prequel, the whale surfaces, that's when her problems are first surfacing, they're first becoming exposed. And she knows something's wrong with her all along. She just can't, doesn't know what to do about it. And, there's a lot of guilt among 2Gs because they feel like, oh, their parents have been through so much. I can't tell them I have problems. It's, how can I give them more grief? That kind of thing. There's resentment too, like you're not American. You're like my friend's parents, there's a lot of stuff comes out, a lot of very, very interesting. It's been a fascinating journey. But anyway, when I started going into, the metaphor of the Jonah and the whale story, I started looking into other mythologies, because as an English major, I studied many mythologies and the importance of water and sea creatures in so many other mythologies. And it could well be that the Jonah story was a takeoff on some pagan myth that, with a giant, because it never says a whale, actually, it says a big fish. There are a lot of very similar stories. I think it was a Babylonian myth that I came across that was almost the same as the Jonah story, only at the end, the main character gets eternal life. That was the difference. Water represents traveling, moving, growth, life. I mean, the ancients didn't know about science, but they knew that water is life. And I mean, like the Odyssey, the whole thing of traveling on water means maturing. When Jonah comes out of the whale, he's supposedly a more responsible person now. So there's that whole idea of water and the importance of water in all religions. I mean, what do you call baptism? In Christianity, the mikveh, the water shrine in the Hindu religion. So the importance of water and the threat of a big sea creature is just something very constant. And I think, as Jung would say, I think it's part of our collective unconscious, and it's there, that fear. Animals, there's always a fascination with dangerous animals. Many ancient cultures, when they go hunting and kill an animal, they will eat the heart because it's taking in the strength of that animal. It's like we're attracted and scared at the same time of them. So I tried to, I wasn't even trying to do that actually, but when I started talking about the book and someone would bring that up, then I went back and I see that a lot of that must have been in my head before. And when I set up my website, I picked 3 sources for quotes. One was the book of Jonah in the Bible. The other was from Carl Jung, and from Moby Dick, even though, again, I didn't talk about Moby Dick, but a lot of people made that connection.
Yeah.
So I put in some quotes all sprinkled throughout the website to kind of inspire people. I don't know if it's it. So that's my story. And I got to tell you, I'm turning 73 in a few weeks. I have never been happier. I got this book out, which was in me. It was like germinating in me for my whole life. I got it out there. And the funny thing is, I think if it had been a success when I was younger, I don't think I could have handled it. I think I would have been terrified that people would read that book and say, you are really weird. What's wrong with you? You are crazy. This must be you. Because my protagonist really does have an almost breakdown. And now they can say whatever they want. I don't care. Some of me's in there, some of me's it's more exaggerated, you know. But I feel like I've reached this point where it happened when I was later in life, and it's perfect because I'm not worried about anything else. I can enjoy the praise and the whatever happens. And if, it's easy to be jealous of someone else, say, oh, how come they got that speaking engagement? Now it's like, okay, so what, So I think my happiness came at the right time. And I really have to say, I think this is like the best time of my life. I hope I'm not going to die tomorrow, but.
Exactly. So you think that you inherited as well, like the woman who screamed when she woke up, you inherited all this trauma from, from your parents or from your grandmother, whatever it is, and this is what you could write about it?
Again, the word inherited is hard to pinpoint because it implies something biological. Yeah. And there is this thing now, the somatic experience where they believe that there is actually a change to the DNA in some people. Okay. I don't know if it could be in some cases that it is biological, but I think by growing up with people that have gone through something horrible, it definitely affects you. It becomes part of you, part of your life. And I think I had my character became sort of morbidly obsessed with like horrible things. And I think that can happen. Okay. I went through a short phase of that. Luckily, I got past it enough to write about it. That's why I think the book, in a way, was a kind of exorcism for me. But I got to put it out there and say that I think this is happening to people in all situations. There's some inherited trauma. I mean, people who, I had an interview with someone on a podcast where she had been a victim of sexual assault. Mm-hmm. And she feels like, when she gets married and has kids, even though she hopes she has solved her problems, they may be traumatized by her own experience, even if she never talks about it. And sometimes even more when they don't talk about it, because it comes out in other ways. I've had people tell me that their parents would not speak of it, but they found out some other way. Like, let's say they gave a testimony for, the Steven Spielberg organization, and they overheard it, or they listened in. The extreme, there was a book that came out in the early 70s called Children, I think it was called Children of the Holocaust. It was a nonfiction account where they interviewed different people who were, 2Gs. And the extremes were very interesting. You've got the one extreme of parents who lived it constantly. They talked about it constantly. Of course, the child absorbs that and never mixed in with Americans or anything like that. Then the other extreme, people who denied it. It didn't happen. The total extreme is people who denied that they were Jewish. They told their kids that they're Christian. And part of that was the fear that, oh yeah, they say in America, you're free and they're not going to go after you for that. But who knows? Maybe they will. We thought we were safe and over there. So there are people who denied that they were Jewish, and the kids find out. In fact, one of the women that I met in Vienna on that trip, she said she was raised as a Christian, and on her deathbed, her mother told her, that we were Jewish. I just didn't want to burden you with that,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I said to her, did you feel resentful? She said, no, not really. She accepted it. And I asked her, did you because I know of someone else where the parents did that and they cut them off from the family. They said, we have no family. So they never met this family that they had till after they, found out. But this woman said, we always visited cousins and aunts and uncles, and they were all Jewish. I said, didn't you wonder how come they were and you weren't? Because, I didn't.
Wow.
You accept sometimes what they tell you, and, so that's the other extreme. And, you find out even people, Jews who immigrated from the Inquisition, 1492, they're in Spain and Portugal, and I'm sorry, not Spain, they're in Brazil and South America, New Mexico, and they were raised Catholic, and they don't know until they're like, someone comes visiting who's Jewish, and I've heard this so many times, they'll say, I have this book that was handed down. The family always hid it, but it was handed down from like my great-great-grandparents. Could you take a look at it? And it's a Jewish book. They were Jewish. And they'll say, well, really? And some of them then get interested. They want to learn. They might even convert. And some just accepted, like, okay, so we were, down the line, we were Jews, but now we're Catholic. So there is that extreme, that fear. People who don't live with that fear, it's hard to relate to that,
Actually, the country of Spain, they're offering citizenship to all of those who actually were pushed away from Spain in 1492. And the certain names, because Sephardic Jews, certain names were suggested to be able to apply for the citizenship. And my parents did get the citizenship.
Oh, okay.
Now they could apply for us, and we could apply for our kids. So eventually,
yes,
we're going to do. But yes, I could imagine on how much of a struggle people had to hide their identity, especially during the World War II. And actually, there was a story about a young kid. I don't know if you heard about it. He was like 9 years old, and he remembered everything about even the name of people in his platoon in the 1940s. And he was able to say the name, and he even was able to remember where the plane crashed. He was a pilot for World War II. And it was kind of, I don't know how they could explain it, but it seems like it was a reincarnation of some sort of that person who passed during World War II and reincarnated into that 9-year-old boy in the year 2000 or whatever it is.
Wow.
So he was able to say the name of the people who was with him, the pilot in his platoon. It was unbelievable. So it is somewhat biological, but also to a certain extent, it can be a certain type of reincarnation.
There is so much spiritual and mystical stuff out there that we don't understand.
Yes.
And, it's quite fascinating, but I agree. Are you from Spain or France?
No, I'm from actually Morocco.
Oh, Morocco, okay.
Yeah, and Casablanca, and then I moved to Montreal, Canada, and then, I travel like in the US and all. But yeah, I am originally Jewish, Sephardic, so my parents continue with the tradition and all. We don't have any family member, if I'm aware of, that actually are Holocaust survivors. But I know a lot of people that are friends of mine that their great grandparents were from Auschwitz. So it was pretty traumatic, especially all the stories that they heard and all. But they don't really they don't wake up in the middle of the night and say, "Oh my God, I remember those memories and all." I don't know how much of people do remember.
Oh, you should. A lot of my interviews, they say that one of the parents would wake up screaming during the night. They would never have anybody sleep over because they were so embarrassed that the mother was like screaming during the night. Some of them would not, like when a siren sounded outside, they would freak. A lot of people won't go near a German Shepherd.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they could love dogs, but not a German Shepherd. They'll cross the street.
Okay.
So it sort of locks itself, certain ideas into your head, and it doesn't let go. My grandparents were in Casablanca. When they got out of France, they were in Casablanca. My mother was already in the States, and they had to figure out how to find where they were. But
the good thing is that King Hassan, if I'm not mistaken, did tell Hitler not to take any of the Jews, and he protected the Jews from from him coming to every country and trying to over. So that, we always are very fortunate that he was able to protect them, and he was able to go to war. And then I think Hitler, for what my parents told me, he said, there's no point for us to waste time. Let's move and continue forward. So he didn't
Okay.
touch Morocco.
Yeah, that's great. There's some places, one of the islands in Greece, the Archbishop, and in Athens also, he wouldn't, he told all his priests to, hide the Jews, to give them false baptism certificates. A couple of countries, they tried to do the right thing.
Yes, yes. Well, and I'm happy to hear that the country of Austria, which was actually German based at that time,
That was the first, yeah.
they were able to kind of like, now they feel they have to atone by for their mistakes. Even Germany, even the chancellor, she feels
Yeah.
extremely guilty from the ancestors who've done all that and who were able to create so much in this genocide that they've conducted. So it's at least they're aware. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
not blame them from the behavior of their past, etc.
Right.
But at the same time, at least they realize what they've done.
Well, yes, Germany's actually been one of the better countries as far as education, and for them it was you're starting with these kids who could go home and say to their parents and grandparents, "Where were you?" It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't like the Civil War in the United States. Some countries, Poland and Romania, I mean, they just are not there yet. Even France now, it's a tough. A lot of the Jews are leaving. They're not staying there. It's just a very volatile time, I think, right now.
I agree. And where can people find your book, Ruth?
Okay. It's sold on Amazon. It's sold through barnesandnoble.com. I was told it's also sold online through Target and Walmart.
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen that, but I've been told. But yes, and it's Escaping the Whale and the Whale Surfaces. And I have a website, ruthswhale.com. So you can, check me out and contact me. I love when people contact me and I have, conversations about whatever, the book or things relating to the book. It's been fascinating. I've just met some really, really interesting people.
Beautiful. Well, Ruth, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. And I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 9 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened to today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Mark Twain once stated, "Stay away from those people who try to disparage your ambitions. Small mind will always do that, but great minds will give you a feeling that you could become great too." He does make a great point. You see, small minds project their limiting belief about themselves onto you, as they're incapable to unleash their full potential. They only look at 1 mile ahead in their lives, as ambitious minds look into a decade ahead. You can't blame them for a lack of belief, as it may be a result of their direct environment. It is possible that they went through some traumatic experiences in life that deterred them from seeing the bigger picture. They can't allow themselves to look at success the same way that ambitious minds do. Because of that, they prefer attracting misery in their lives and add everyone they know into that mix. Hence, they will do whatever they can do to crush your dreams. They don't want to be left alone in their miserable hole they call life. There is no reason to argue with them, as they live in their own world and just should not be disturbed. All you can do is nod politely and move on with your dreams. Staying away from that toxic mentality will be one of the best approach you can take in your life. Follow your dreams and succeed. My name is Dr. DanAmzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.